Today we're on board the Oceana Ranger in Sardinia, Italy, to search for and document illegal drift netting in the Mediterranean Sea. Although entirely banned, the fishery continues in various countries, killing large numbers of migratory species, including cetaceans. A drift net is a large floating wall of monofilament mesh deployed from a boat. The net hangs vertically from the surface to a depth of 30 metres. They can be up to 20 kilometres long and drift freely for hours or even days. Fishers using drift nets want to catch tuna and swordfish. However, drift nets catch everything that swims into them: fish, sea turtles, sharks and rays, dolphins, and even whales. Drift nets are banned because they take large quantities of unwanted catch called bycatch. We talk with Amanda Nixon of the WWF Global Species Program in Rome.
Bycatch refers to the situation that occurs when an animal that is not in the intended target of a fishing activity gets caught in the gear of that fishing activity on the end of a hook or entangled in the line or something like that. Many animals are killed or injured each year as a result of bycatch in fisheries.
Researchers on board the Oceana Ranger are systematically documenting the use of illegal drift nets in the Mediterranean Sea. The Ranger is a 23-metre catamaran crewed by a team of dedicated marine scientists, photographers and videographers, and led by marine conservation veteran Javier Pastor.
Since 2002, it is forbidden to use the drift net. The European legislation bans it for the European fleet, following the former moratoria that was made by the United Nations. There is a general knowledge in the fishery sector, in the governments, that the Italian, the French, the Moroccan are using drift nets, but actually there is very little documentation, and there are very little proofs, evidence. So we are out at the sea with the Ranger.
Oceana document the names and registration numbers of individual boats participating in this illegal fishery. They film and photograph the nets being deployed and hauled in, collecting data on their catch. From this, they publish reports and submit them to the European Commission, national governments and international media to highlight that this fishery continues despite numerous bans.
It puts organizations like Oceana in the position of having to do a job that should be made by the government, which is documenting, making lists, filming, giving information to the international conventions. And that is the reason why the lack of enforcement by the government is the reason for this permanent problem.
Well, drift netting, again, it's very unselective, so they're large nets and a lot can get caught in them. It's part of the reason they're popular as well, because a lot can get caught in them, and they're relatively easy and cheap to operate. So from a political perspective, there has to be substantial political will and enforcement in order to make a ban such as that work, and I guess what we're seeing at the moment is that those necessary elements aren't in place yet.
Due to illegal drift netting, as well as poorly managed fisheries practices, the populations of Mediterranean bluefin tuna and swordfish have dropped by an estimated 90%.
In the case of the swordfish, it's obvious that the population is declining. You can see it in the catches, you can see it in the size of the stock, in the size of every individual that is being caught, when you see it both in the market but also in the footage of the drift nets. Many of the swordfish that are being taken today have not been even able to reproduce.
According to Oceana, an estimated 85% of animals caught in drift nets are unwanted bycatch, thrown back into the sea, dying or dead. Among them are species such as the critically endangered leatherback sea turtle. This illegal and indiscriminate fishery also threatens Mediterranean cetaceans.
Bycatch is a major global problem. For cetaceans, we estimate at least 308,000 cetaceans each year are caught in fishing operations. That's about 1,000 a day or one every 2 minutes. So the problem is quite enormous.
According to the World Conservation Union, this fishery kills thousands of dolphins every year in the Mediterranean Sea. Entanglements in drift nets are also the main cause of sperm whale decline. The Tyrrhenian Sea is an area notorious for cetacean bycatch in illegal drift nets. Researcher Barbara Musi studies cetacean populations in Ischia, Italy. She often observes fishing boats deploying drift nets in the area. She told us about an incident where an entire sperm whale family was entangled in a drift net.
In 2004, 5 sperm whales were entangled in a drift net. There were 2 adults and 2 calves and 1 juvenile. They were completely entangled with their tail all in the nets. And the Coast Guard, a special group of the Coast Guard, of divers, rescued all of them. They were sinking, slowly sinking. Since the operation lasts for 2 days, you know, everybody speaks about the drift netting problem, but it's when you see the imaging of the animal and the huge amount of net on the tail and on the body is something different. It's important.
In the past 3 decades, 229 sperm whales stranded along the coasts of Spain, France and Italy as a result of being entangled in these nets. This is an astonishing number for an isolated population numbering in the hundreds. Italian, French, Moroccan, Turkish, Tunisian and Algerian fishers have a combined drift net fleet of about 500 boats. Spain enforced the ban. Unfortunately, instead of destroying their gear, it was sold to Moroccan fishers, allowing that fishery to expand.
Many of the owners of the drift nets just sold the nets to across the Alboran Sea to the north of Africa, to the Moroccan fleet. Another of the reasons why this fleet is growing is because the result of this catch is being sold to Europe through Spain.
According to Oceana, only 2% of all the swordfish caught by the Moroccan fleet is consumed in Morocco. The remaining 98% is exported, 95% of which is allocated to Spanish companies, 3/4 of which is re-exported to Italy.
So the European Union is buying fish that is fished with gears that are forbidden by the European Union. So all this is completely madness.
Because of public demand for high-priced swordfish and tuna, there is massive incentive for this illegal fishery to continue.
Swordfish is very popular in Spain and Italy, and people don't have a clue of where the swordfish comes from. They go to the market, they buy it, they don't know if the net, the gear that has been used is a forbidden net or even it's a sustainable net. They don't know what is the state of the stocks. They just realize that the swordfish and tuna are smaller and more expensive every day. But there is fish in the market, so they buy it and they don't ask questions, at least in this part of the world.
With so much at stake, tensions are increasing on the high seas and the work of Oceana is gaining notice.
They are trying to ram our boats. They are illegal fishing boats and we are in position 42 degrees 55.8 north.
In May 2007, while documenting illegal activities in the Pelagos Marine Sanctuary, a group of French drift netters attacked the Oceana Ranger and her crew.
Then we were surrounded by 7 boats with a number of very aggressive fishermen that was threatening to go on board the Ranger to take the films and the cameras unless we gave them to them.
When helicopters arrived from the French Navy to break up the confrontation, the drift netters fled the area at high speed. After hearing reports of drift net boats in French ports, Chris and I visited Saint Raphael in southern France. We walked the docks, photographing driftnet boats tied alongside a French Coast Guard vessel, the illegal nets piled on the ground in full view. We were left wondering why these boats are still allowed to operate.
Some countries like France and Italy are using it is because they have found some loopholes on the ban. The Italians simply changed the name to their net. They changed it from Espadara to Ferratara, and with this they thought that they could just go around the legislation. They say it's a coastal net, which is not true. They fish in international waters in 1,000 meters depth. And the French have used a more sophisticated approach. They say that they use a floating anchor on the net, which limits its drifting. So if it doesn't drift, it's not a drift net, and therefore it's not forbidden. Obviously that's a joke. That is not what happened. First, because even if they use the anchor, that is still drifting, it has the same impact. But then we have been able to document that they don't even use those anchors, which are useless anyway.
In an attempt to solve the problem and encourage driftnetters to change to other gears, the European Union and Italian government subsidised the Italian fleet €200 million in recent years. However, most fishers bought more drift nets and kept fishing. It would seem the only way to stop this illegal fishery is to enforce the laws that are already in place. Javier Pastor hopes that the research and imagery collected by Oceana will make a difference, putting an end to an illegal and destructive fishery that operates largely out of sight and out of mind.
We are not going to stop until we get rid of the drift nets, because it's a plague and it has been admitted by everybody, United Nations, the national governments, everybody. There is no discussion whatsoever about the damage that drift nets does. And we have legislation now. We only need enforcement, so we have to push for the enforcement of those laws.